appreciate the new I do really appreciate the new ELA team being here. As Jennifer said, they're going to give us, a status update of where they are and where they want to go. And many of us who have been around MCPS know that that is not traditionally how MCPS likes to operate. The MCPS often wants to wait until everything's perfect before they share it with the community. And so I really appreciate the team coming here tonight, having trust in us and our community to present this as they go along, because it's really exciting. And we're glad to have them. So thanks.
Oh, okay. So wait, what did I just do? No, I'm going the wrong way. All right. That was our agenda. There we go. Sorry. So we're going to have them present, and then we're going to take question and answers, which we'll monitor. We will facilitate. And then we are going to have a brief discussion about secondary education. The focus today and the team that is here today is our elementary team. Montgomery County is still, has some room to grow in secondary, and we recognize that. Kelly and I are both parents of secondary students. So we want to give space for the parents that are here to also, express their wishes and hopes for secondary, because as this really exciting work happens at elementary, we'd love to see it go up to secondary too. So we will have a brief discussion there. And then we're going to have a call to action where we hope everyone will work to help support what's going on here. So that's the agenda. And Laura, did you want to share a screen as well?
Sure.
You have it. Okay, so I'm going to highlight you and Malika Brown. Anyone else that I should highlight? It's you two, right?
Just
Yes.
the two of us are here.
Okay. Thank you. But where did you go? Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I got to get Laura up here. Bear with me for a second. There we go. Add spotlight. Wonderful.
It's slideshow. I think they changed the word. Yeah.
That confused
They
me.
did.
Thank you for saying that. I was like, what?
They changed.
I don't like changes. I like a lot of changes, but I don't like that kind of change. Okay. Sorry.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. We are so thrilled to be here. Laura and I, you'll see in a moment, are 2 of 5 members of the entire team. And, when Kelly and Jennifer, when I first met them, it was pretty exciting, new into the position, but like opportunity to exciting and scary. Let me be fully honest. New to the position, know the history of how things work with MCPS and community, and it can either be great or not so great. But we were very excited, got on board right away, shared our wishes and our hopes and what we were thinking. And both Kelly and Jennifer were so responsive, so appreciative. So when they asked us to be here tonight to continue to share that, it was an absolute yes. Because that's part of it, right? We want to share what we're doing and be 100% transparent, and not about perfection, but really the focus is just the progress that we're making. So we are so glad to be here. The next slide. So I am Malika Brown. I am the elementary ELA supervisor. This is my first year in the position, a whopping 6 months that I've been in it, but have been part of elementary curriculum. I was a specialist on the same team 3 years ago for 3 years. We do have, and before I get to Laura introduces herself, this is the entire team, and I'm pointing to it like you can see me. We have Vivian on. She is one of our instructional specialists. She was on the curriculum prior to a different specialist position, and so she's back on this team, and this will be her 4th year. We have Jessie and Colleen, also new. Both came out of a school, so this is their first year in central office. Both served as reading specialists in their schools, and are just, bringing that sort of, fresh out of a school lens, which is incredibly valuable. And I'll have Laura introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I learned about this organization, I think in I don't know if it was 2018 or 2019. As soon as I did, I started, coming to meetings and being a fly on the wall and getting the lay of the land and seeing what I could do in my role. I have been a school-based reading specialist for over 20 years at Gaithersburg Elementary. And this is my first year in central office as well, instructional specialist on the ELA team, but also with an added designation of reading intervention and dyslexia. So some of you may have met Thais Council, who had this role before me. So she went on to teach at the college level and do a bunch of research. And so I am here in this role now. So yeah, and it is a brand new team and 3 of us right out of schools. It's been really exciting work so far. And I've only been on the job since August. So I'm even newer than Malika.
Yep, but we are small, but mighty. For the work that it really is our passion and the conversation that we engage in all the time around what needs to be done in the best interest of our students. And so that's what we're here to share today. Let me go to the next slide. So we're going to take it through in 3 parts. When our team initially came together, one of the things that we thought was incredibly important was for us to really create a vision, and not just a vision for the team, but a vision for MCPS around literacy. So we sat down together and we talked about our current state. We talked about the ideal state and what we needed to get there, and crafted our vision and crafted our mission. So we're going to share that with you. And then when we got through our vision and mission, we had to really think about, well, what does that work look like? And really in stages, because as I think it was Kelly that mentioned earlier, MCPS, we're huge. We serve almost 160,000 students, 209 schools, 135 of those are elementary schools, 14,000 staff members. And so when we think about the work, it's not just at the drop of the hat. It's a lot of strategy and planning and methodical thinking that goes into it. And so that's really what the team has been doing, really being thoughtful, and while recognizing where we are, but also really focused on the direction that we need to go so that we can get to all students leaving elementary school as readers. And then looking ahead, we know with all of the disruption that took place last year and coming into this year, what we're currently facing, the potential schools closing, we have a lot of teacher absence, student absence. There's just a lot that's happening, and we talk about it all the time, we are remaining focused. And so we have a plan looking ahead for next school year and beyond to continue to get to where we need to get to. Like I said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 6 months. And it's really, honestly, it's not going to happen in a year. But there are definitely things that we can continue to do to get to where we need to. All right. So again, for our vision, if we can go to the next slide. Yep, thank you. So again, the focus was, the way that we looked at it was, who do we serve as curriculum leaders? Who are we serving in MCPS? And we're serving 3 pockets. We're serving students, we're serving teachers, and we're serving leaders. And we really wanted to start with our students, because what do they need? And so part of what they need, is literacy skills, and then how do we get to that point, and really focusing on students' individual needs. No 2 students are the same. They all come in, they bring different things into a classroom, they bring different things into their learning, they contribute to their own learning in different ways. And so we really need to make sure that they are receiving instruction that's tailored to meet those individual needs. The other thing that we thought while we were thinking about our vision was, curriculum. Curriculum plays a huge part in this, the text that they read. And so we want our students to be able to see themselves in text in a meaningful way, not just represented, they're there, we've done it, we've checked that box, but really it promotes joy and affirmation when they open up those texts. But it can't stop there, right? We have a vision for what our students need. Well, how do we get to that? then we had to focus on our teachers. And so what do we need for our teachers? They need the skills and knowledge to be able to do that, to be able to assess, diagnose, and then in order to provide that targeted instruction. And from there, our teachers can't do it by themselves. They need leaders. They need leaders to support them. They need leaders to hold them accountable. They need leaders to also have that a knowledge base to coach them, to support them, so that their instruction is effective in meeting the needs of all students. And so here, this is what we're striving for across our elementary schools at MCPS. And so if that's what we want, well, we're not just going to leave folks out there to go do it by themselves, right? That's where we come in. And so this is our mission. And so this is the work of what our team. So to ensure that our students are getting exactly what they need, those literacy skills for, and honestly, not just in elementary school, but beyond, right? We want them to be, we want to set that foundation, but then for them to take that beyond elementary school. So they're going into middle school as skilled readers and going into high school as skilled readers. And so what do we do for our reading specialists, the work that we're doing with our teacher leaders and administrators, so that they have that understanding through the professional development that we provide, and you'll hear a little bit about that later, that's focused both on reading as well as equity and anti-bias, anti-racist leader learning as well. And so the work that we do directly informs and impacts the work of our reading specialists, and then get to our teachers, that then gets to our student outcomes. Okay, so a little bit about our current work. So when we came into the team, there was already a lot of things that were happening. There was professional learning, particularly around the curriculum that was taking place. There was a lot of school support. But because our team was new, we really saw it as an opportunity to, yes, there's some great things that are happening, but this is also the perfect opportunity to capitalize and really put some new things in place. And if we go to the next slide. And one of the biggest things is really being the shift. Right now, MCPS, we are a balanced literacy system. That's what our curriculum, that's what our instruction is really around, balanced literacy. That's really driven and rooted in guided reading and those level texts. So during small group instruction, and a lot of parents, I know many of you, if you have an elementary school student, you've seen that level on the report card. Oh, my student is reading at this level, this level for marking period 1, and they're reading at this level for marking period 2. And that's really around, that's the heart and the root of balanced literacy. But what we really want to move to is a structured literacy approach in instruction that really focuses on the research and providing opportunities for that systematic, explicit instruction in foundational skills, really honing in on those early literacy skills. There's also, I think this is probably a misconception that's out there, that it only focuses on foundational skills, which is not necessarily the case. There's also a lot of instruction that's around that complex text and vocabulary development and comprehension and building knowledge. Is also a very huge part of it. So we're teaching them the decoding and how to read, but then there's so much more that goes into that with the vocabulary and building knowledge. And so transitioning a system of almost 8,000 elementary school teachers, it's really a shift in mindset and a shift in belief and a shift in, for many of them, all they've known. We've had 15 years of balanced literacy here in MCPS. And so shifting to that structured literacy is the work that we have to do, the work that's necessary, again, to get back to what our vision is, that all students, they're all leaving elementary school as readers. All right. So a couple of things that we are doing. So this year, we have, and started this summer, we're doing letters training. And so we're doing it in a couple of different ways. We have 120 teachers in our pilot schools, and Laura's going to talk about what I mean when I say pilot school. She's going to go into that in a moment. And LETTER stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And for the teachers and our reading specialists, it's 2 volumes, 8 sessions. really focus again on the 5 components of reading, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. Oh my God, I just lost one. I'm drawing a blank.
Phonics.
That's the first one. How am I forgetting the first one last? Sorry. Not to mention, I just said this exact, I said that at the board meeting today. And that's what it really focuses on, that and how to systematically teach reading. So we have a cohort of teachers that are engaged in it. They started this summer, and we have all of our reading specialists that are also doing it, which they love. And we've just, based on engaging in the training, we've already seen and we hear about a change in their practice that has, it's just informing and kind of what our goal is this year for schools is creating an environment of inquiry, because we haven't had the chance to put this sort of professional learning in front of teachers as of yet. But we're creating this environment where they want to learn, they're eager. And so when we get to that, and when we get to this change, reading specialists are months ahead of our teachers because they're the ones that are going to be leading it. And then we have 40 administrators across different schools. They completed letters for administrator in December, and we're adding 2 additional cohorts because, our administrators, they need to also understand, how students learn to read so that they can support and coach their teachers while also holding them accountable. And then we have this structured literacy pilot. That was a big part too. Thais, she kind of laid that foundation, support with Laura, and with the code and dyslexia group to really get that going. And so we have 9 schools that are, ahead and getting it started. Initially, it was supposed to be a 3-year rollout, take some time to get to the other school. To get to the other schools to get them on board. But this little old team here, like, why do we need to wait 3 years? Let's just do it with everyone next year. We can handle 135 schools doing the shift. And that's what we're doing. And Laura will get into that a little bit more. And then going back to really shifting from the balanced literacy and this dependence on guided reading and level text, we are also working with schools to lessen that use, right? Like, not every interaction with a student during small group instruction needs to be around a level text. And so 2 things that we've been able to put in place. We've removed the leveling off the report card because that continues to reinforce that practice, and that's not what we want. We know families might be missing it because, same with our teachers, it's something that you've seen for the past 15 years and have become dependent on using as an indicator for how your student is reading. But that's not necessarily the case. That's not something that you need in order to determine how your student is reading. Because really the focus and the goal is always around grade level instruction. And so what's important is to know within that grade level band, within the grade level text, within where they are supposed to be foundational skills within the grade level, how they're doing with that defines how your student is doing as a reader. That level text does not define how your child is doing as a reader. And then that takes us to the guidance and support using varied text and really elevating the use of decodable, those controlled texts. It hasn't been a thing as much. It's been here and there, but not used nearly as much as it should be used to support instruction, to reinforce the skills that are being taught, to provide students the opportunity to continue to practice those foundational skills that are being taught. And so we really elevated the use of the decodable and continued with complex text because that's something that's important. That's where we get that vocabulary. That's where we build knowledge. Through Read Alouds, students hear what a fluent reader sounds like, and they're able to, teachers are modeling those sorts of things. And so that use of complex text is also incredibly important. All right, if we can go to the next slide.
I think I did.
Yes, you did, sorry. And then some other things to really continue for the work and the shifting these, because we also recognize that, and the reason why this is progress over perfection, we couldn't just jump in and make, change everything. So we had to really think strategically about what are some of the things that we can change, that really wouldn't put a burden on schools, but also knowing that teachers have not received the professional learning that they have needed, and we're moving to that direction. We had to put things in place that the lack of learning that they've received so far would not impact. And so another one that we were able to do is really support them with increasing. It was not a recommendation, it was kind of an expectation to increase their literacy block. So the time in their literacy block that's spent in foundational skills to up to 40%. Right now, they're balanced between whole group, small group instruction, using those reading lessons that are focused on the comprehension, and some time, not the amount of time that we wanted to see around foundational skills. And so one of the things that it was increasing that time. Again, continuing to focus on that complex text, but really kind of emphasizing and reinforcing the need and the use in those whole group lessons, really ensuring that there are rich books that are being used with students, because again, the importance of that vocabulary and continuing to build knowledge. And then responding to the dyslexia screener. So I know that I'm being recorded, and I'm going to say this because I do like my job and I want to keep my job. So currently, and particularly in our grades K-2, we're using MAP RF as the assessment that we use. And we know that there are some challenges with it. And there's challenges with any assessment, right? None of them are perfect. But the goal of it is for us to, as a result of a student taking the assessment and a teacher administering the assessment, that it really hones in on what the student needs are, what their strengths are, so that teachers can make instructional informed decisions. And so what we found with MAP-RF, there was no way to screen for dyslexia in a really meaningful way. And so they do have they have a different component to it now. And so for K and 1, again, I'm not saying that it's ideal, but it's a step in the right direction for where we're hoping to go. There is a foundational skills with dyslexia screener component of MAP-RF. And so we've not just encouraged schools, but that's the assessment that they're using for K and 1 to be able to screen. And so students are flagged based on how they demonstrate on the assessment. And then we're working with schools, okay, now what, right? So there's that flag in their MAP-RF. So what are our next steps? And we've worked with a reading specialist around, well, that's only one piece of data that tells us how the student may potentially be doing. Sorry, yes, MAP fluency, MAP reading fluency, I apologize. And then what are some additional things? How do I continue to gather information about the student as a reader in order to determine what are my next steps? Are they flagging because and there's something I need to do just around first instruction. So it's not an alert like, bam, the student has dyslexia. That's not what it means. It's an opportunity to continue to dig further to get continue to get a deeper understanding of what the student's needs are. So it's not a red flag going off, it's an alert to continue to dig a little deeper to determine how to respond and what needs to be put in place for students. Some students are screened and that first instruction that they're getting is all they need. Some students, it shows up on the screener and then there's additional steps that need to take. And so working with the classroom teacher and the reading specialist to determine, well, what are we working with here? Is this a student that's flagged, but they'll get that first instruction and they'll be good to go? Or do we need to continue to utilize additional assessments in order to really hone in on what the needs are? And so that's what we're working with our schools. There is a potential change, even though we put it, this is the assessment that we're using, because of the limitations. and that opportunity to progress monitor. That's the difference here. With the MAP reading fluency, it's done 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end. We're hoping to, because we know 3 times a year, yeah, that's giving you great information because you're seeing that growth. Excuse me, but teachers need additional data in between that. So from that, excuse me, from that fall to winter, what's happening with a student, right? And so teachers need opportunity to progress monitor, to continue to check in. And so we are pursuing a change in assessment that really allows for not just the 3 times a year alone, but those additional incremental opportunities to collect data. I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot today. All right, if we can go to the next slide. And I think
You have it. You get a break now.
that was a lot.
Yeah, so the structured literacy pilot, and I was just multitasking a little and seeing some great questions in the chat that I definitely want to address, but just one of them I just want to throw out there. When we talk about phonics, not everybody hears phonics in this way, but it absolutely, phonics includes spelling. They go hand in hand. Someone asked about writing and spelling. So explicit instruction in the code includes both decoding and encoding. So, reading and spelling. So that's definitely part of it, even though we don't name it all the time explicitly. That I just want to address that one, but there's other really good questions in there we want to get to. So the structured literacy pilot last spring, 9 schools were identified to pilot a structured literacy approach in K-2. And like Malika said, this is a 3-year pilot, and we're still going to be working with those schools, going forward for sure, and funding them with what they need in order to keep this going. But like I said, our vision is that we're going to expand it faster than perhaps originally envisioned. That's what we're going to try to do. There's a lot that goes into structured literacy, and you're not going to see all of that on these couple slides that are coming up. There are components that were added to their programs, deleted from previous balanced literacy approach, and then big shifts that these schools really made this year. It was a lot to jump into, in August, and I will just say that schools are doing so great. Part of my one of my priorities in my role is overseeing this pilot and working with the reading specialists on a regular basis and getting into the schools and seeing it happen is really exciting. So the plan is to continue to build the capacity of these schools and teachers to achieve a comprehensive structured literacy approach to teaching and learning. Here are the components that have been put in place so far. And again, the focus is on K-2, but structured literacy truly is it goes through, it could, go through, secondary as far as an approach to a comprehensive language instruction. But this pilot's focus is K-2. That's where students need to learn the code of text. That's the years that students need to learn how to take the print off the page and translate it to the language that they recognize and understand what they are reading. That has to happen in K-2. It doesn't always, and we have a plan for when it doesn't, but that's why the focus is on K-2. So here are 2 major additions and 1 significant shift that these schools made this year. All students are receiving daily, explicit, and systematic instruction in learning the code of text through phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. That's a big addition. Some of the schools are using IMSC OG and as their curriculum for that piece. And others are using Really Great Reading, which is Countdown Blast and HD Word. All these schools are also using DIBELS. So you heard Malika talk about MapRF. These 9 schools are using, they also have to give MapRF. So it's not in place of, they're still doing MapRF because that's our county measure, but they are adding DIBELS to their program. So they have been, they assessed in the fall, they're assessing now for the winter window, and they'll assess in the spring. And it's DIBELS. DIBELS stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. We're using the 8th edition. And but they're also progress monitoring for students who don't meet the benchmarks for each window. Progress monitoring these students every 2 to 4 weeks as well, on a smaller battery of tests. We're not over testing them. It's just a 1 or 2 minute measure that we use for progress monitoring is in regard to the student's time. But that's not only to monitor progress, but also to identify specific areas of instructional need. And then we're assessing those needs and we're addressing those needs, excuse me, in either whole group or small group or a combination of both throughout the day. One of the biggest shifts, though, is using decodable text instead of leveled text for students who are not yet fluent readers, which is most students in K-2. Decodable text is designed to offer practice to students so that they can practice the phonics skills that they're learned, the ones that they learned most recently, and also layered with the skills that they've learned previously. That's that systematic approach to instruction. So they're getting, these decodable texts are developed on a gradient of increasing difficulty in phonics skills. And so they have to apply what they've learned so far and perhaps that new one in connected text. This develops their fluency and fosters automatic word recognition, which is what we ultimately, not automatically, it's ultimately what we want. Leveled text, which is used in balanced literacy, and I think we're all familiar with, it's not supportive of early readers. And we're reading the research that is telling us that. And it can actually promote poor reading habits or promote poor reading behaviors that become habits that will have to be broken later on. So we're really trying to avoid leveled texts, we're not using leveled texts to teach beginning readers how to read the code because the leveled readers are really developed purposely because of the approach to instruction in balanced literacy. They're purposely designed to force children to look away from the tricky word and use the picture instead. They're designed for that purpose. So we don't want that. We want students eyes on text, eyes on letters, practicing their phonics, learning the code. And they're gonna get exposure to all other kinds of wonderful, great texts that are more rich, less stilted perhaps in content for all that language development that they need. But for practicing the code, we give them decodable text. And these schools also received a lot of professional development on the science of reading, the components of structured literacy, and strategies for effective instruction. They've also had training from the instructional programs that they're using, like Really Great Reading and IMSCOG, but they're also getting additional PD time. Sometimes I'll go into schools and do PD on request. We want some PD on this specific thing, or just to support what the messaging that they're needing to do in schools. But finding PD time in schools right now, as you can imagine, is really hard, really, really tough right now. One of our schools, of the pilot schools, engaged in a 3-part series of PD on dyslexia, which was, that was very excited that they were willing to take that on right from our first session was during pre-service. So that was awesome. So as time allows, all of the schools will receive that kind of PD in order to, because primarily the structured literacy pilot is addressing tier 1 instruction, but we all know that we need a plan for tier 2 and tier 3, and all teachers need to understand dyslexia. All students are always daily engaged in complex text through read alouds and shared reading. Those of you who are familiar with Scarborough's rope or the simple view of reading, those models of reading that illustrate that codependent nature between oral language skills and learning the code of text, it's essential. And they're not learned all together at once. We don't throw them into text and expect them to synthesize all of that at once. Students hear and learn and understand more complex language structures through read alouds, so that when they are fluent decoders, they're able to understand more complex language in text when they come upon it. They learn vocabulary and they learn content, which is so important, and apply all of this learning through discourse and language, all this new language, they practice and use it in discourse. MCPS is conducting an evaluation of this pilot, and we're going to be engaging in our first set of surveys in a couple of weeks with reading specialists, the teachers in these schools, and the administrations in the schools. So like testimonial data, like how is this going? What are we seeing from kids, et cetera, to evaluate the efficacy of the pilot. All right, I think I'm turning it back over to you, Malika.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I was trying to answer some questions in the chat. Okay, so looking ahead to next year, and I think this will help to answer some of your questions around what are the other schools going to get? And so I'm so sorry. I also have a little puppy that gets very excited when he hears something. So, sorry. And so a couple of the things that we really wanted to put in place is around professional learning. And so our first one, if we can go to yep, perfect. So for our summer training, it's really going to be focused on that science of reading for all of our K-5 teachers, as well as our English language development teachers, our administrators, and our teacher leaders. That's the work that they're going to do. We're still working out the kinks around the amount of time that we're going to be able to get with them. We're pushing for at least a day or half a day to really kind of work with them around the why. Why is this shift to a structured literacy, and why is the science of reading so important? And so that's what we're going to present them with. It's the why. From there, we are also going to, if we go to the next slide, continue to provide opportunities for, as I mentioned earlier, additional cohorts of teachers and administrators to engage in letters. I'm sorry. This is the time of day that it happens. And so we have, again, one cohort of administrators completed letters for administrators. We were able to purchase enough for 2 additional cohorts for this year to get our administrators in. And then we were able to purchase another 2 cohorts of 40 teachers for full letters training for our teachers. And then this summer, we're hoping to continue to add those numbers. That particular training will be primarily, it's voluntary. It's very, very expensive, and it's 8 full days. And so we're not in a position to require that. And so it's the balance by providing this opportunity for some folks to be able to engage in, as well as providing our summer training for all teachers to engage in around their learning around the science of reading. So we're kind of hitting it in 2 different ways. If we can go to the next slide. So this is what I touched on a little bit, but Laura mentioned that we are proposing DIBELS to replace MapRF in our K1 and 2, because we feel that what the information that it gives you, and it's truly a diagnostic to determine, what are students' areas of needs, what are students' strengths, in order to continue to provide that additional support and instruction in a meaningful way. So that's the other part. We can go to the next slide. And then to answer the question in the chat, what schools get to do this in the fall? Well, all schools. All schools are moving to a structured literacy. At the board meeting today, I did sneak out the words science of reading. It hasn't been something that we've talked about in that space, and so made that very clear at the board meeting today. But that's the move. Every single elementary school will transition to structured literacy. All teachers will be trained on the science of reading. We are hoping to continue to increase the use of the codable text across our really a K-5. We're hoping to put some additional programs and materials in place, so that teachers have access to foundational skills programs that are really, really meaningful. And we're also hoping to continue to design and deliver learning that will happen over the course of the school year as well. This isn't just we throw some learning at them over the summer and then we're done. Go live your best life. I hope you learned something. That's not what the plan is. We're going to give them a taste of learning in the summer. And then we're going to continue to provide and create spaces and opportunities for our teachers to engage in learning over the course of this school year. So as they get better, so that they can utilize that learning to better their practice. And I believe that is it for the presentation part.
You have our Twitter hashtags there if you want to follow us on Twitter. We often do shout outs when we see incredible things happening in schools, and it's just we love a lot of support with that and getting the word out of evidence of the shift.
Thank you guys so much. Do you want to stop sharing and we can take some questions? So we had a good many questions in the chat, and I think you guys covered a lot of them. What I'll ask is, if your question wasn't covered, please put it in the chat again, or you can feel free to raise your digital hand. That if you go to reactions at the bottom, you can raise your hand and let me know you want to verbalize your question, which is fine. And also, there have been a lot of questions about middle school, and we know middle school is a big problem. I don't know if you guys have anything you speak to. There was some questions around 3rd, 5th, as older students, how are they going to catch up? But middle school is something that we're going to have to collect information and ask for a meeting with the middle school folks at MCPS. This team really can't speak a lot to middle school. If there's anything you want to talk about from some of the older, what's the plan for older students that might still be behind that had this balanced literacy in the beginning?
So I can start, and if you want to jump in, Laura. So 100% we recognize, right, that we are moving fully to this next year. And so that does present, our current 5th graders, they'll be in middle school by the time this happens. But just to kind of, it's when we're talking about this increase around foundational skills, it's, yes, our pilot schools are K-2, but this isn't the increased use around foundational skills, that really systematic instruction. For our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders as well, when they demonstrate a need, when they're showing that there's gaps in that learning, this is in response, and the teachers are going to have the knowledge and the skill set to be able to address that. So it's an elementary thing. It's not just a primary, it's for all elementary students. All elementary students will benefit from this. While they're building their content knowledge, they're also, if they need that support around how to read, they'll get that as well. And they are there's additional word study that continues to happen in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that will continue to be elevated, continue to be reinforced as well. So it's not just for those early grades. I love the question, how structural literacy in our 2A in our immersion programs, and also what it means for our multilingual students. And that's part of our work too. All students, will benefit on learning how to read. The beauty about it is the emphasis on connecting it to not only a student's home language, but also for our immersion programs, making the connections between those programs as well, those languages as well. So it's not something that's done like, it's not only English. There is a systematic approach to learning how to read and write in other languages. And so making that connection for our students. Our level readers using grades 3 to 5. Yes, level readers are used across all grade levels. However, it's a practice that we are hoping to move away from. There is a use for it, right? So we're not saying that don't ever use a level reader ever again in your whole life. There is a use for it, but what we have found is oftentimes in MCPS, so when we use small group instruction and guided reading using level readers synonymously, right? Like when we hear small group instruction and what we've done around small group instruction, it's all been around leveled readers, and that's not the case. It shouldn't be like that. There's an opportunity to use it, but we have to be really thoughtful about why and when we want to use level readers. Because if I have a 5th grader, who potentially needs a lot of support with grade level text, that level reader, the below grade level reader, is not going to close that gap. It's not going to get them there. So there's the work that the teacher does with the grade level text, really focusing on that vocabulary, really focusing on that comprehension. And then there's things, around the decodable text, because I need to figure out, well, what's the struggle around reading, right? Why isn't a student reading on grade level? And a level text doesn't do that. It doesn't help to continue to allow for growth.
There's some questions, and there are some questions along about benchmark. Is Benchmark staying with us? How will this work with Benchmark? What will the actual instruction be?
So that's a great question that we talk about every day. So for next year, Benchmark is still in place. We have a set of schools that this is their third year in Benchmark, and then we have the majority of our schools, 88 schools, this is their second year in Benchmark. And so we understand the challenges that Benchmark has presented, right? We are living it, we feel it. But two things. First, Benchmark does have a brand new curriculum. We're hoping to pilot that next year in about 9 schools. They've really responded to a lot of what we have brought to their attention. And so it's a brand new curriculum. The reason that we're piloting it is because we're still in contract with them, right, for another 2 years. And we can't, the reality is switching to a new curriculum in the fall for all of our schools would be a nightmare, right? The amount of training that goes into it, the cost around materials, it would just be a nightmare. And so that's not the direction that we're looking to move. We are prioritizing the professional learning around the science of reading. If we switch to a new curriculum, we would have to prioritize the learning around a new tool. And that's not the case. The other thing is our team is really kind of just like elevating this, like the need to not get caught up in the tool. There's no perfect curriculum. It's a tool. It's a tool that the teachers use to provide instruction. And so we don't support this sort of like heavy focus on it. It can be anything, right? Any tool you can put in front of a teacher. You can put an excellent one in front of a teacher. You can put a not so great one in front of a teacher. But depending on the skill set and the knowledge base of the teacher, that's where the impact is. And so if we focus on the learning of the teachers, they can take that Benchmark, right? And there are absolute components of Benchmark that will support the shift to structured literacy. They have, there's phonics and foundational skills embedded in their curriculum, and they also have additional resources and additional components that does support the shift to structured literacy. Is it fully ideal in its current state? Absolutely not. We're hoping to add some additional things, all budget pending, of course. We've asked for it, so we'll see. I was told that I'm very expensive, and I kind of like that. So there's some additional things that we're hoping to add that will make the shift a little easier for teachers with the tools and the programs that they have to use. So that was a long way of saying, nope, Benchmark is not going anywhere right now. That's something that we'll reevaluate next year to determine if their new product, Benchmark Advanced 2022, meets our needs, or do we need to move in a different direction? But we need time to do that, right? We don't want to just jump out there and make a change, and the change not be very thoughtful.
There's a question, a really strategic question in the chat about how do your office works with other offices like special ed, and there's a lot that they listed several different areas: family support, SSI, shared accountability. How do you work and collaborate with those other offices, and how are they responding to this shift and what you hope to do as an office?
I think I heard part of your question, but I'm having a crisis. Sorry, give me one moment.
No worries.
One of the things when I came on board, Malika was very clear and to kind of distributed each one of us across different departments, like you're saying, to foster more communication between departments, because we can keep saying this, how huge we are, but we are, and we have these silos of departments that I think over history have not done all the best at communicating. So we really are working on that. We know that we need to be very, very in touch with our English language team. We need to be very much involved with the special education team and the secondary team and across content areas and all of that. So we really are, we're trying to, we recognize that need very much as a team, and we are definitely working on that.
And I do want to address the question, around Benchmark again, right? Like what we hear and what we know intimately around benchmark are two different things, right? We've seen the curriculum. We are very intimate with benchmark, and so we definitely know the challenges that exist. But we can work around those challenges in order to move in the direction that we need to move in, because it's just throwing it out and starting over. It sounds like it's an easy answer and an easy response, but it's not. It absolutely isn't. And there are definitely components in benchmark that allows for an increased use and increased opportunities for students to engage in foundational skills. And we see it, right? Because we know the curriculum, we live the curriculum day in and day out. And so I know, as a community member, I have 3 kids in MCPS now myself. And as a community member, I know the things, there's a difference between what we hear, and then there's a difference between because and that's MCPS's fault, right? We don't always give the amount of information that we should be giving. So we kind of leave things up for people's interpretation. So is benchmark perfect? But are we going to make it work? Because this is what we're given. This is a tool that teachers are given. We are 100% going to make it work. And that's not going to be the barrier to move this work.
Yeah, and I think what I've heard you guys say is that, we have another year with benchmark. We just have to, and that year will be a reflective year. Ellen is a great resource in offering some other rubrics and things. So next year's your research year on benchmark, right? No one's saying it's here forever. It's, we've got one more year, but you're still making the shift despite benchmark being here and providing the tools that we can have. And I think we have to recognize that we're in COVID, and these teachers have been through this won't work without teacher support. We cannot make this shift, which, as Malika said in the beginning, is a 180 from what these teachers have lived and been taught in higher education. Our higher education system is teaching balanced literacy. And so you're telling them the sky is actually green, and it's not blue, it's green. So these teachers, it's such a big change for them. So I can understand we really got to work with teachers, and a whole new curriculum, throwing everything out next year during COVID, everything would I think be disruptive. But I also really appreciate you guys saying next year we're going to look at the data, and if we need to change the curriculum, we will, right? So I know this group is not a benchmarks fan, so we will continue to push you guys on that. And
I don't think we found a group that's a benchmarks fan.
There's not a lot of benchmark fans out there, and so
I love
it. Let's see some other questions. Someone asked about summer training. Was someone trying to talk? Sorry.
Oh, no, that was just me
Okay,
unmuting.
in the background. Okay. Someone asked about the summer and how Letters works with previous training that they've gotten, from IMSE and things like that.
It's not going to, with the training, those teachers who got IMSEOG and really great reading training, those are programs. Right. So those programs reflect the science of reading. So when we do our summer training, which really is going to be designed to teach all teachers so that they understand how the brain learns to read, how the brain does not learn how to read, what to do when students are not learning to read, and why that might be. None of that's going to conflict with the program training that they got in IMSE and OG or in really great reading. It's actually going to be very supportive. It's going to go more deep into the reason why those programs are effective, but the summer training will be less about program and be more about professional learning.
I just want to Renee's point as a teacher, decodables. We have a team right now that are currently evaluating decodables. Every book that we put in front of a student and use for instructional purposes has to be evaluated to make sure that it's, it's appropriate. So we just don't put anything in front of kids, because that wouldn't be great. And so we have reading specialists that are in the process of helping us to evaluate those texts. And so we've already approved a good chunk that we've shared with schools, and we're going to continue to approve as we see them happening from publishers. We get them in our hands so that we can read and get them approved, because that is key, is being able to utilize the decodables. And the other thing, there are other components of benchmark that are not fully utilized, right? There is a full advanced benchmark advanced phonics. that's, that is a full program that allows for that practice, because the lessons that exist, they don't fully allow for opportunities for practice, opportunities for reteaching. And so there is that component that does that. And, again, we're looking to see what are some additional programs that we could either bring in and have teachers utilize to continue to provide that instruction. Someone's hand is up, I see.
Oh, great. Thank you for helping with that. Suzanne Johnson. Did you have a question?
Sorry, I'm trying to find unmute.
Okay.
So my question was around partnering with families and also with the local library. Because education has been this way for so long, there's all these, the resources that are available to families are leveled readers, or what's in the public libraries. And then, so I was wondering if you're partnering with the public libraries so they can make the shift to decodable readers. And then how are you planning to, help parents? Because we weren't taught phonics either. So I know I struggle as a parent knowing how to help my child, because the school wasn't, she didn't go, she went to a balanced literacy school, and I went to, I didn't learn phonics as a kid. So if you could touch on those two topics, partnering with families and the public library. Thank you.
That is a great question. And that's something that we probably definitely should, pursue, because, many of our students go to the library. The library, those picture books and chapter books and, books that you find in the library, they are rich for, again, vocabulary, again, for building content knowledge. And so we don't want to, put the kibosh on those, because decodable, there's a space for both. But I do think there's a way to kind of see, do the libraries have decodable texts? I haven't, and if that's something that we can work with them, here are some titles and the ones that we're using in schools, and have them, to see if that's something that can then happen in the library as well. So it's an excellent question, and definitely something that we can look into. I do really quickly, because we do have, and I know elementary has monopolized the time, and I find that that's what elementary tends to do sometimes. And particularly, I am a talker, but I just, we do have Jacqueline Lightsay. She is my secondary counterpart on the call. So I don't know if she, wanted a quick introduction, or to say hello, but she is here because she, wanted to be in the space with us today.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I didn't want to shift the focus until everyone, felt that their questions had been answered and whatnot. But I did hear loud and clear the need for a more robust discussion, especially around middle school, which I am more than happy to do with this group, maybe at a later time. But I do want to share just a little bit that while we do have approaches at the secondary level, such as Orton-Gillingham, that we do use in secondary, we know that secondary teachers in general are not as knowledgeable, especially across content areas around dyslexia and what the impact looks like in content courses. And as everyone knows, reading is one of the main ways that students learn content in secondary school. So it's really important for secondary teachers to understand the science of reading, even at, kind of a basic level. If you're, say, a social studies teacher or a science teacher, it can be incredibly beneficial to understand just the basic facts around the science of reading, because if you notice a student struggling, there are some really concrete steps you can take to support the student. So we've been working, we just started kind of our new partnership across secondary and elementary, because as you all know, the elementary team is new and my team is also new. I'm entering my second year now, and our specialists are new as well. And so we started a collaboration recently where we are really trying to learn from the elementary team and try to take some of the amazing work that they've been doing around the science of reading and make it applicable for secondary. And just to build our own internal knowledge base as secondary folks, so that we can really think about providing some learning that really is immediately applicable to the daily instructional practice at the secondary level, especially for middle school. So we're just in the beginnings of that. but I just want to acknowledge that we definitely recognize the need, especially now, for a better understanding of how students learn to read, because as you all know, once you get to that middle school level, there's an assumption that all the students are walking in with a certain level of reading skill, and teachers at the secondary level aren't necessarily equipped to diagnose whether or not that's the case, or if they can figure that out, they're not always equipped with the strategies to know what to do about it. So we want to make an effort to continue this collaboration and learn more about how this can work at the secondary level. So again, I'm really interested in, I saw that little sneak peek of the slide that you had around secondary questions. I'm very eager to hear what those questions are and take them back to our team, and hopefully come back and see all of you at another point with some more ideas to share.
Really thrilled that you're here. We didn't know you were going to be able to come.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt because I know there's an agenda, but yes, I am here and I'm listening.
Yeah, and it'll be perfect, I think, because we do have a few minutes dedicated. We'll be wrapping up by 8:30, but we have that slide where hopes and what the needs are at those levels, so you can hear those, take them back, and then we'd love to invite you back to another meeting where we can have you be the main act, I guess, right?
That's great.
We probably need to transition to that conversation in the next couple of minutes. There was a question about speech language pathologists. Several people asked about that. Are you guys working with the oral language side, Laura?
I just tried to, I'm so bad at
No, you're doing great.
chat answering and listening at the same time. It's tough for me. I tried in the chat, but I'll just, I agree completely that the work of SLPs is it's very directly related to the work of learning to read, because SLPs are true experts in phonology and articulation and the production of those sounds and how sounds go together and how sounds are distorted when some sounds are put next to others and all of that. And they get that and they know all that, and they work with kids that need extra support with that. But all of that for all children is the foundation of learning the code of text, because it starts with oral language and text represents the phonology of the language we speak. So I agree with that suggestion very much, that when I spoke of silos, and I probably shouldn't have used that analogy, but we should be connecting with them because it's directly related. I mean, you can't separate that from learning to read. So I love that you put that in the chat, and we will do that.
Great. And I think Ellen's worked with Frederick, so if you need some introductions and some of those folks, we have some great people on here that would be happy to.
I would love a connection. We've connected with Mississippi. They've shifted their whole state. I've been in contact with folks in Texas as well, because they've put in some legislation around this as well. And so we're working to do our due diligence. We know we're not the first and we won't be the last. And so definitely listening to what others have done and lessons learned, because we want to do it right. We don't want to just, hey, we're saying this now, and then in a year we're on to something else. We know this is important. We know we're late. We're acknowledging that we're a little late to the game, about 15 years late. But we're here now, and that's that's what we're doing.
And Reagan Kelly is with us too. She's a huge resource and has worked with other states and school districts. So we'll connect you with Reagan as well. And Malika has been at the Board of Ed meetings. Like, you just get major props for coming and being awake and being able to put two words together. I don't think I'd be able to. Y'all have done a great job. Thank you so much. I hope everyone is excited as we are about all of this. And we'll pass on any other questions we have. If you guys would like to go, you're welcome to. Our next bit of time is going to be talking about secondary, but then we're gonna challenge this group with helping you guys and the secondary too, because as many of you heard from Malika, they've called her the expensive one, right? So I think there's a lot of support in MCPS from what I've heard from you guys of leadership and what you're doing, but that means money. So what we need to do is help this team fulfill their dreams and really get the funding and leadership support to implement all that they want to implement. So that's what's coming at the end, the specific ask of everyone in this call to help these two. But I know y'all have had a long day, so you're also welcome to drop off and we can catch you up. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to remove the spotlight so you're no longer on.
Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. As many places as we can share what we're doing, that's important, because again, everybody needs to know. It's not a secret. it shouldn't be a secret. So we really appreciate the opportunity for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I echo that. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks. I also wanted just to jump in to say that we will be saving the chat from this session and going through them and figuring out if perhaps there's questions we didn't answer that perhaps you could expand upon. And so if your question didn't get answered, we'll do our best to try to answer it post meeting.
Kelly,
And you can also share it with us because there's some great things that we need to continue to consider. That would be incredible as well.
100%. Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we were really lucky to have an unexpected guest from MCPS in regards to secondary education, because we know that, Jennifer and I have been at this co-leading Montgomery County's chapter of Decoding Dyslexia for 6-7 years. And so our children are in secondary. I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, and folks have come along with us. And so we know that there are still a lot of questions and concerns about secondary for kids who are not necessarily reading at grade level or need support for struggling readers at middle and high school. So we thought that we would just start have a quick discussion, to talk about what kind of questions and concerns do you have about secondary, about middle school and high school. And if you wanted to put those in the chat, we'd be really appreciative, because we'll use these to help inform, our further advocacy and work with MCPS to try to improve what's happening at the secondary level. So we'd appreciate if you'd put your comments and concerns or hopes or dreams for middle school and high school in the chat. And if you'd like to raise your hand, you're more than welcome to speak.
Hi, my name is Nakan. I have an incoming 6th grader next year, and she's coming from a learning center this year. So we're already starting off in the negative going to middle school. How is this program going to transfer over to secondary to help build their foundation and continue their building when this program that you're presenting tonight does not help her going into middle school?
Mm-hmm.
And just to make clear, Jackie came as we didn't even know Jackie was coming. So Jackie, don't feel like you have to answer things yet, because I know your team is new. So we can collect all these questions, and if you want to speak on any of it, you can. But collecting all this questions and things for your team, and then having you back is also an option. So just letting you know that. Thank you, Nakan.
Yeah, a good question.
I'll just say briefly, I definitely want to listen and reflect on all the questions before kind of jumping in and speaking without, having a chance to reflect. But I will just say, at the middle school level, we do have supports for struggling readers. It just looks a little bit different because of the way that middle school is structured as far as the student day. But we have the multi-tiered system of support that we do in elementary school, where we use a lot of different data points to identify what students really need as far as any support with reading instruction. Sometimes it's within the classroom, just embedded in their regular instruction. Sometimes it's a period within their day that they engage in for a period of time until they've made a certain amount of progress. But it's a very individualized decision-making process where, again, multiple measures are used to decide, what's the best fit for the student, and not just a blanket reading support class, but a specific intervention or program that is matched with the student's particular needs. So that is in place at the middle school and the high school level. But we are always trying to refine our methods and strategies for identifying what supports would be best for students. And so it's helpful to have your question, because that transition from the learning center to middle school is something that might require a little bit more specific guidance for staff and for families as well. So I appreciate the question.
So we're getting some great comments in the chat, and I really appreciate them. There's a wide variety of comments and concerns about middle school, and we'll definitely be sharing these on with MCPS. So, if there's any more, I really appreciate folks putting them in there. I personally, echo Heidi's access to resource support classes, particularly also at the high school level. They seem to be disappearing at MCPS with quite a bit of quickly, I think that some of the challenges and barriers to middle school are related to the way the day is set up. And I don't think we're always doing as creative job as we could with thinking about how we can meet kids' needs within the middle school day. I think I personally would like to know more about the interventions that are available at middle school and if they're based on the science of reading or not. That's one of my own hopes, my own wishes.
And how
And-
streamlined it is. We've heard MCPS often has a huge number of interventions, but are the kids getting the right intervention? It's the harder thing, especially in middle school, I think.
Mhm.
Does anyone else want to unmute themselves and speak?
Hi, this is Heidi Armanda. I just have found in middle school and in high school that all the supports are not to improve my child's reading, but to get him to pass the class.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like, it's that teach your child to fish and they can eat for a lifetime. I feel like my son is being pushed through school, never learning to be able to read so that he can learn. So it's like he's being given knowledge, but not given the skills to acquire the knowledge that he needs on his own.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have to agree that, there's no teaching of reading necessarily that I don't feel in middle and in high school. I do have concerns that at high school, Blair High School is doing what they're calling detracking. They're just calling a spade a spade. They're admitting that they basically have the gifted and talented kids, right? Then they have the AP kids that are, more rigorous in their study. And then they have a lot of kids that are, that are below grade level, and they have these tracks that our kids end up being in. And Blair's High School, in their presentation this past fall, really I have an 8th grader, so that's why I attended at the open house, made this pitch for their equity, that they're trying to detrack their students. And I just think that has a lot of complications for the kids in there. And how do we give those kids support that are detracked, that are all together? How do we make sure that the kids who are still struggling readers because of our approach for the last 15 years, how do we support those kids? How do we really develop their skills so that they become readers rather than just graduating? Because it doesn't really matter. I mean, a high school diploma is important, but we really want them to be stronger readers. And only 50% of kids pass the 10th grade ELA exam, so in MCPS. So that's really, how do we build those fundamental skills in middle school and high school? It's one of my biggest questions.
And I think, what is sort of there's kind of the interim plan, right? If we get this shift that the ELA team is talking about, then that's going to pay off. And it may not be we need the same thing in 10 years that we need right now, but we have to make up for that 15 years that we've had balanced literacy for so long, and then hopefully can untangle that once the kids are getting the foundational skills. So it's an interesting thing to think about for the middle school team, that like maybe what we're going to implement is not going to always be implemented. It's just kind of putting out this fire that exists right now. Suzanne has her hand raised.
Oh, great. Thanks for noticing.
Yeah, my daughter's in 5th grade. Thanks for predicting another question on my part, but going into the middle school. And I mean, I guess I would call her a stealth dyslexic. She does extremely well with language comprehension, and all the assessments they've done to this point, say, oh, she's doing well in reading. So they never got to the root of the problem. And that's my concern with some of our middle schoolers and high schoolers, that they'll be in middle school and high school, and we don't have the right assessments in place to see where the learning gaps are. They just keep moving her along, not realizing that there's a problem, yet, she needs to be more independent and take notes and things like that are a struggle for her. So my suggestion or consideration to note is, maybe there's some more assessments that need to be done, especially if a parent's raising a concern. And, I don't know if Dibbles assessments are appropriate for older grades, but just something to consider.
Yeah, and I also see that Kelly Dordan made a similar comment, Dordan, about how struggling kids are identified, and I think that that is a really good point. Yeah, and making sure that the tools that we're using to identify these kids are based on the science of reading.
If you don't mind, I'll chime in there too. I think that when I came on board with the title Reading Intervention and Dyslexia for 160,000 students, and those of us who know the percentage of students who have dyslexia, that's like 32,000 students. It gave me stress, but I think it's the approach is all of you are raising such good points. And I'm so appreciative of Kelly and Jennifer bringing that up, is that it made total sense that I was placed on Malika's ELA team, because identification is so difficult when tier 1 instruction isn't in place, because we can't identify actual learning challenges from instructional deficits. And so when and I know our current kids that are in the, in secondary now, and even in 3rd through 5th, who didn't experience structured literacy in K-2, but it makes sense because a true MTSS model is based on solid tier 1 instruction, and then also a system then to address that. But when solid tier 1 instruction isn't there, and if students with dyslexia never learned the code, then we can't address needs appropriately. So I just wanted to say that that's one of the reasons why I think this shift is really exciting for the county as a whole, and long-term planning. But I am absolutely hearing all of the chat and your questions in secondary. And our students do need continue, if they haven't learned the code, and maybe they're in 8th grade and they still haven't learned the code, they need to learn the code. We can't just ignore the fact that they don't have those skills and accommodate only. I agree with that completely.
We do have one more hand, and maybe we'll take Carly's hand, and then we'll move on to our big ask. And please continue to put things in the chat. Carly, do you want to talk?
Yeah, so my daughter, like one of the other women, was identified as dyslexic in 5th grade. Going into 6th grade, we were moving actually to Montgomery County, and she wound up doing an intervention called Wilson, which is based on the Orton Gillingham. It has really helped her. So she really did need very codable text when she was growing up, and I kept asking the teachers, and they were like, no, she's fine. But she basically had all of these compensation techniques that she was using, unbeknownst to my husband and I, that she, with her dyslexia coach, kind of figured out and kind of honed in on. So that middle school was great. And the high school, now she's taking a lot of AP courses. It's great. But she has her own techniques that I think that the older kids, if they share these techniques with other children that have these problems, it may be, I don't know, more beneficial peer to peer, because like you said, we can't go back and recreate the wheel for them, unfortunately. So I don't know if you can even educate the teachers that sometimes the note taking, not on the computer, but by hand, is oftentimes just better for kids with dyslexia.
I think, getting more awareness for all the middle school teachers is a great goal. I really agree. Thank you, Carly. Kelly, we good, ready to?
I think we're going to move on. We really want to thank everyone for their thoughts on secondary and high school, and middle school and high school, and we will definitely take those back and further engage MCPS. But there's also a role for everyone on this call to play, and that is our call to action for everyone here on the call. We have been at this, started by Ellen O'Neill, for about 7-8 years. And in the beginning, the parents were struggling for dyslexic students and struggling readers. They couldn't even get into the front door of MCPS. They couldn't even get MCPS's attention. But a group of parents and community members and teachers have worked really hard over the last several years, and MCPS has been listening. Thais Council, who was the first dyslexia specialist, instructional specialist that was hired a few years ago, it was a direct result of Decoding Dyslexia Montgomery County's advocacy and a board member of the Board of Education who listened to us. So really, I know there's a lot of like Twitter warriors out there and a lot of people who keyboard warriors who spend a lot of time typing around out there, but truly, your emails and your calls to the Board of Education and to Dr. McKnight, they make a difference. So we are here to ask you to after tonight, find some time in the next few days to write a letter to the Board of Education and to Dr. McKnight and thank them for their shift. Thank them for the work that they're supporting right now for us to shift to the science of reading, because our kids need this. We need to make sure all of our kids learn to read, and they need the science of reading. And so, kudos are required, they've been deserved. They've worked, they've made changes, and we really need to thank the ELA team and thank MCPS for supporting the ELA team. So first and foremost, thanks. And then, ask for more funding to support this work, such as additional staffing, professional development, and curriculum materials. Ask for more funding and more staff to support similar work at the secondary level. You all can give your own experiences, whether you're a teacher or an advocate or a parent, about why these things are important and how they could impact you or your community. But please write those emails, call if you want to, and really just ask for more support. Again, also reach out to your principals and your reading specialists. They need to know that right? To thank them for taking on additional training and for being willing to learn, because, you've been, like Jennifer said, you've been teaching reading one way for 15 or 20 years. You're told the sky is blue, and then all of a sudden someone's telling you it's green. It's completely different. It takes humility to take on a whole new training and learn something new. It takes a whole lot of dedication. They care about their kids. So please reach out to your principals and reading specialists and thank them for their effort and their time. Share that you support this work and the shift, and encourage them to learn more and support their teachers in the work. And if you feel comfortable, please share the information with your parent community and your PTAs. You could ask for the presentation to be done at the PTA by your reading specialist, for example, so that more parents understand and that they can too help then advocate for this work for their own kids and for the larger community.
You might get some blank stares from MCPS is so huge. So your principals or your reading specialists might not know yet. So that's the second bullet. If they don't know about the shift that's happening, encourage them to learn more about it. And when they do hear about it, to support it. So when they hear about these trainings, the letters trainings, it'd be great if we had the principals on board for the principals to go to letters. I mean, right now our teachers, bless them, they're just working so hard and doing so much. And my principal sends out emails every day about what buses are running. I mean, when did she think she'd ever have to do that in her life, right? So that we're in unprecedented times. They need our thanks and our support, but if they can, this reading is so key to all success in life. So, helping in any way you can, encouraging them to also prioritize this would be really huge.
Yeah, and sometimes I think MCPS thinks that it's just me and Jennifer sometimes. We have big targets on our back, but it's never been just us. And any support that you can lend will really demonstrate that it's not just us, and that there is an entire community out there of parents and teachers who are really interested in seeing this happen and are grateful for the work, but definitely need it to continue.
And we can even make it easy and send in follow-up email. So you guys have the email address for our Board of Ed and maybe some of these leadership folks. We'll try and do that and put that on our to-do list. Carly has her hand up again. Did you want to speak, Carly? DJ, hey, I didn't know you were here. Hi, DJ.
Thanks for coming, DJ.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time tonight and coming in and spending an hour and a half with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're done. But if you have questions or want to hang out to ask us anything, again, thank you, MCPS people that came. Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
That all the time you spent, and then, having folks come that we didn't know were coming. This is a whole new world where MCPS we have always said, we just want to partner with you. We want to help. We want to be part of the solution. And I think we're finally have teams that want to take us up on that offer. So we as an organization and as a community really just want to support this amazing work. So thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording.